Hello, my name's Robert Thorn, and I am the founding head of Developing Real Learners. Developing Real Learners is a non-profit organisation which helps schools to change their approach to education in a more holistic way. So more about that later. I have a talk to give. We're at the 13th ANPS Teachers Conference. The theme of the conference is Building Back Better, Virtual and Reality. My talk today is about securing the foundations upon which we can build back better. So, let's see what I have to say. So, I chose this title, Securing the Foundations Upon Which to Build Back Better, for several reasons. Firstly, as I'm in contact with lots of schools in many different countries, I'm beginning to see something emerging. It's almost like, for those people who have been really affected in schools by the pandemic, what I'm seeing is this. We learned a lot of things. It was like being in a long professional development session in a way. We learned loads of things and we saw weaknesses in our system that we weren't aware of before. And we started to think, well, we can do something better when we get out of this. And so as we're going back to school, we're beginning to think, well, three things can happen, can't they? Number one, we go back, we've got those exciting things that we want to build back better. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to bring in that technology, we're going to bring in this idea, blah, blah, blah. But are we not adding these things in on a foundation which was never really very secure in the first place, and probably, I think, got us into trouble when the pandemic hit? Okay, a bit more about that later, perhaps. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we get back, there's the old classroom, there are the old kids, and we've got a heavy timetable, we've got heavy sessions, we've got to do all that planning, and we just slide back into the lovely, comfortable familiarity that we had before. And I'm sure a lot of kids would like that too, just getting back to normal. So all that learning that we did goes out of the window. It's a waste of time. So I said three things. Now, the third thing is something that I've noticed a lot of people have been talking about, that kids have lost so much learning. How will they ever catch up? Right? And especially people from very content-laden curriculum, because they haven't managed to get through the curriculum. The children aren't at the right level and standard, and they haven't done the set experiments, and they haven't done this, that, and the other. What do you do if you're teaching a course, for example, like a 2-year course, examination course, all right? Just to imagine this if you're a primary teacher, right? So you've got an examination course, and you've got a set syllabus, and you've got to get through it, and a new child comes a quarter of the way or halfway through the course. I had that once. What did I do? I got the books out. I said, look, this is the syllabus. These are the things you've got to learn. Get on and do it. I'll help you as much as I can. And I basically said, do this, do that, do this, do that. Explained everything very quickly. And he managed to do a year's work in about a month. Yeah. Was he empowered? Did it help in any way? Well, okay, maybe that's a great experience for him in a way. But if all of his lessons were like that, it would be pretty horrible. He's not empowered, that I'm in control, I'm telling him what to do, he's just doing what I'm telling him, he was complying. Not the best of situations, is it? So to go back to school and then say, right, all those things, the wonderful things I've learned, I can't do because I have to get the kids to catch up. So we'll lose it. Yeah? Very sad. So if your school was affected by the pandemic, as most were, then you may be saying, oh my God, we are behind. The kids are behind. So now there's not just a risk of going back to where we were before the pandemic, there's also a good chance for young people that education will get worse. Of course, if they were all good students, that might not happen, might it? Like that student that I was talking about a minute ago, who came into the class late, to the course late, he caught up very quickly. Why? Because he was a good student. He did as he's told. He followed what I asked him to do, and he worked right hard. Yeah? So if all the students were good students, you could give them the syllabus, give them the textbooks, tell them to make use of Khan Academy and all those things that are online for the explanations that he might miss, and kids would probably be pretty good. Yeah. So if they're all good students, they actually wouldn't fall behind, would they? However, they're not, are they? They're not all good students, and nor should we expect them to be, especially when we've sort of let them down a bit, I think. So they need us teachers, don't they? Why is that? So my premise is that they aren't all good students because they need to be good learners first. All young people can be good learners. And once they are good learners, then they can be good students. It's not like you have to wait to the end until they become good learners, of course. As long as they're on their way to becoming good, aware, holistic learners, they can become better and better students. So in securing our foundations for building back better, we need to ensure we build the foundations, develop the learner, and young people can be good students. But they can also learn to become good friends, good supporters, good citizens, good entrepreneurs, good leaders, and so on. So let me do what I said and lay the foundations for this premise. So what do young people really need from education? Now, several years ago, I started asking young people, teenagers mainly, what they thought education should be doing for them. There were, of course, many different answers and many different ideas put forward, but a running theme started to emerge in all the different cultures and social levels in which I asked this question. And it's probably best put by a group of around 114 teenagers that I managed to get my hands on, and I managed to have them for a significant amount of time, which is important because they began to realize that I wasn't asking them to give me answers they thought I wanted to hear, but their real answers. And also, it was good to have them to listen to each other, to take some time with this question and really dig deep, get them to listen to each other, to collaborate, to edit their answers, to compromise, and to agree on a final reply. Let's have a look at that reply. So having 114 teenagers in one room, getting them to agree on one answer is, of course, an exercise in itself. If you are truly going to get them to all have input, to all have a say, to all agree, to all be together and come out with this one answer that they sort of say, yeah, okay, that's good enough for me. But that's another story. Okay, let's look at this. So education needs to maximize our opportunities to be happy and successful now and in the unknown future. Okay, there was some really grumpy teacher said, oh, what about the unknown future? No future is known. Anyway, but we left unknown future because the kids really loved the dramatic sound of unknown future, right? The other part that I had a little hand in when they said happy and successful in the unknown future. I said, oh, you don't want to be happy and successful now. Oh, they said, of course we want to be happy and successful now. And so they put the now in. And then somebody said, what do you mean by happy? So we went back into our big group of 114 and we asked that question. Of course, it's good for young people to explore what they really mean by things like happiness and success. And so we asked them, we talked about it. Somebody found this diagram describing 3 levels of happiness. And I know there are probably other models with more levels and different levels, but we used this. And you could call these levels perhaps the frivolous, the engaged, and the engaged with others. Or you could call them the titillating, the relevant, and the meaningful. But with something that makes you laugh, with something, part of your life where there's relevance and where meaning is being created. I think we're close on our way towards happiness. So when we discuss this diagram with young people, sometimes very young people, even younger than teenagers, and we found that they were always able to express and to relate to these different stages. They knew about making a joke where everybody laughs. That's an important part of their life. And they were also knew about the times when they were really focused on something, and they were doing something that was meaningful to them and relevant to them, and they were so focused on it that time just slipped by. And when they finished it, they felt, oh, I've done it, I'm happy. So they could relate to that. They've experienced these things. And then also working as a team to get something done. Now, maybe in their family they haven't felt that. Maybe it takes that experience to come from school. Maybe, or maybe not. Maybe the family has done something together, and they've been an integral part of it. They've chosen something. They've performed some role that's meant that the family event went well, or the family holiday went well, or the trip went well, and they have experienced this all coming together. Many sports people, little children who are playing a sport feel this when the team comes together, and they were part of it. So this is the higher level. They've experienced these things, but it's really quite sad, and that I think it's really sad that they actually hadn't thought about it like that before. So you could argue that they're not literate as learners. They're not literate about their feelings, about the sensation of happiness, the thing that they feel good about. So wouldn't it be good if they could actually identify and describe these stages of happiness in their lives, and perhaps begin to get more from them, create more opportunities for them to happen, to know what it is they're feeling and to feel good about it. What do you think? So now, knowing that young people are interested in happiness and success and think their education should give them the greatest opportunities for happiness and success in life, and being able to define what happiness was. Success, by the way, was also questioned, and I think the best answer was, success is where we can make our lives happy most of the time. And the boy who said that, I often quote him to groups. People agree generally, wow, it would be great if most of our life we were able to be happy, with all the people around us as well, of course. His friend said yes, and also to make enough money to buy the toys and things we want in life. Of course, we have to make a living. So, happiness and success. So knowing that kids think that education should help them to be happy and successful in life, one thing we have to ask then is, what are the things about us that can improve our opportunity to be happy and successful in life? So is there something about us? Are there attributes that we have, that we can develop, perhaps? Maybe our education should be developing attributes that will help us to become happy and successful in our lives. So I ask kids this, but I also ask teachers and parents, and I asked them in many different countries, and it was pretty amazing what happened. So before we go on, let me just say what I mean by attributes. And when I'm asking this question to people, I often explain, try and define what I mean. So I mean habits, skills, and dispositions. And sometimes people say, well, what do you mean by dispositions? So what I mean by dispositions is sort of how you naturally how you naturally react to something. So you walk into a room and you look, oh, there's something strange. I'm very curious about what's going on in this room. So you start to ask yourself questions. Yeah. So that's a disposition. You go into a new situation and you start to ask questions. So the curiosity is there. It's bubbling on the surface. And it's your natural tendency towards reacting to a new situation, perhaps. And then inquiry, for example, inquiring, finding the answer is more like a skill, really, because you have to be quite skillful to actually say, okay, how am I going to find the answer to this question that my disposition, curiosity, has given me? Okay? So there's a difference between skills and dispositions. Yeah? So the results I get, of course, when I'm speaking to Japanese teachers or to parents in Lebanon or to a range of people all over the world, I get a whole load of different things. And part of the exercise, part of the workshop that I give is to actually take what they've said and to start to put the things together, start to collate their ideas so it makes more sense. So instead of ending up with 136 different attributes, actually we end up with a smaller list of attributes that come under a certain umbrella. So here are the umbrella attributes that I have discovered. And for some of you who have perhaps work in programs where they have learner attributes, you'll see that some of them are the same. And there's a reason for that, because we're all human. Yeah. So it's not surprising that people come out with the same attributes if they do this. Anyway, let's have a look. Okay, so heart-minded, for example. So heart-minded is an amalgamation of having empathy. So a lot of people said, young people really need to have empathy these days. They need to understand people who are different from themselves. Okay, that's very good. Young people have to care about things. So young people have to be determined, more determined to get to the answer. So I gave a lot of thought to determination, for example. Now, if you're determined to get to the heart of an issue, that sort of means you care about getting to the heart of an issue. And so I chucked it into heart-minded. So heart-minded means caring about things, having empathy, and caring about things enough to resolve an issue or to get to the heart of the matter. So caring isn't just a fluffy thing. It's a tough, hard thing that you have to work for. And proactive is like, instead of just sitting there and waiting for the teacher to come and tell you what to do, you actually say, what is it we did last time? And what do you think we're going to do this time? What did the teacher say about it next time? I'm going to take charge of my learning. Yeah? So, collaborative and independent, seemingly opposite things, and yet we all need to have these things. We need to be able to learn and work with others. We need to be able to learn and work on our own. Open-minded and principled. These are a wonderful yin and yang of attributes. Open-mindedness. It's wonderful to be open-minded, isn't it? And so one of the questions I asked them to get them to understand open-mindedness is, can you be too open-minded? In fact, you can do this for all of these attributes. Can you be too principled? Can you be too open-minded? Can you be too courageous? Can you be too collaborative? Oh. There was an article in a business newspaper just recently about being too collaborative. Yeah. So obviously it's a thing, and it's a question to ask. So can you be too open-minded? Of course you can. You don't want people running around killing each other and eating babies, do you? No, you don't. So your principles are there to put a ring around your open-mindedness. And your open-mindedness is there to challenge your principles. And the two of them form this lovely thing that produces your values. Wisely courageous. Yeah, we want people to be courageous, but we don't want them going off and doing crazy things, which are really dangerous for them and their others. So wisely courageous is good. Anti-fragile. So there's a big thing about resilience. I did a recent talk about resilience in Tokyo, and everybody's going on about how we should be resilient. Yes, you do. When something tough happens, it is good for it not to negatively affect you in the long term. However, how much better would it be, and how much more human would it be, that when that big bad thing happens, you actually get stronger from it? That's what being human is. We are resilient when we have to be, but most of the time, we're anti-fragile. We bounce back higher. Erudite is like understanding things and having a lot of knowledge, but knowing when to use it and how to use it. Effective communicators, if you know things, not much use unless you can communicate. And you can have knowledge communicated to you too. So, curious inquirers. So, as I said before, being curious, being able to ask, having the disposition to ask lots of questions, but also having the skill to be able to find the answers to those questions. Entrepreneurial. This is where the disposition of seeing opportunity. You can develop this in kids. Is there an opportunity in our classroom for us to grow our curiosity? Yeah, you're getting them to be entrepreneurial, and what I mean is the entrepreneurial spirit. So seeing opportunity and taking advantage of that opportunity and being innovative and creative with it. Okay, so innovation and creativity, they used to appear on this list, but now they're in entrepreneurial. Agile thinkers, all those different ways of thinking, critical thinking, metacognitive thinking, all the sorts of thinkings you can think of. Yeah, that's in there. And then balanced is a really important one. Why is it important? It's important for our bodies, of course, but it's also important for our minds and our development. So to ensure that we develop these wonderful attributes in a balanced way. Okay. Now, some programs and some people say these are the attributes of our program, not these ones, but their ones. Those are the attributes of their program, and that's it. Finish. Draw a line under it. Finish. I don't like that. In fact, just recently, very recently, someone came up with an answer when I challenged people and said, "Oh, you have to think up your own." All right, and somebody said optimism, and I thought that was very good. And where does optimism, does it fit into one of these things, or is it a new one on its own? And I don't see any harm if in your school or with your children you talk about optimism and you look into finding ways to develop that optimism. So I said that these were interesting to me. I found it very interesting, and perhaps it shouldn't be such a surprise. Because whoever I asked, from Switzerland to Lebanon, from Russia to Japan, rich and poor, in private schools and state schools, everything they say fits into these tables, and sometimes into the last box, of course. But pretty much it's tight, It's there. And it's amazing. But it's not amazing in a way, because those are all human beings, recognizing the human condition, the human attributes, the attributes that have got us to where we are. And so I say to people, when they've been through this process and we've come up with attributes like this, and they say these are really important for our children. And then I say to them, so who is teaching the children these attributes? And suddenly, it all goes quiet. And okay, there are some, especially Western teachers, we always do that, we always do that. When you look into it, they don't, or they do it implicitly. And many good teachers, of course, do this implicitly. That's not a problem. Many teachers say, we don't. But then when we do some digging, we find out that they actually do. So let's just have a think about that. If these are the attributes that have been identified as being very important, you can do the same thing with your people and come up with your own list. But I'm sure you'll come up with many that are the same. And if these are really important, and if these are human attributes that are important to us and have got us to where we are now, surely they must have some bearing on something like the pandemic. So here is an exercise for you. What attributes do you feel are necessary to cope with the pandemic? You don't have to refer back to my list. You just come up with your own ideas, okay? But first of all, let's have a look at maybe some questions that might help you to think about this in a little bit of a better way, yeah? So I think most of our lives have been affected by the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic has affected most of us. If you haven't been adversely affected, why not? And I think that's an interesting question in itself. Now, I know that some people have had really tragic experiences, and so I'm sorry really for bringing this up. But anyway, let's just do it in general. Everyone's had a different experience. You've had your own experience. You've had the experience. You've seen how it has affected people around you, from friends, what you saw on the news. And if that's not enough, how about thinking about these different roles? The people who first identified the virus, discovered it, identified it, understood what it was and what it meant. What sort of attributes do you need to be able to do that? And then the leaders, the world leaders and their advisors had to work out what to do. What sort of attributes would they have needed, assuming they did it well? What sort of attributes would they need to do that well? And then there's the essential workers, the people who went into work and kept things going when people were locked down, risking infection, going into hospitals, running buses, running shops. What did they need to be able to cope? What attributes did they need to be able to cope with that well? Then there's the young people, of course, the young people in schools, the people who miss school, and their teachers who tried to catch up, tried to keep things going, tried to innovate, to create, and their parents who struggled with that situation. What did they need? What attributes did they need to cope? And of course, then there's the huge numbers of people who have lost their businesses, lost their jobs through the pandemic. What attributes do they need to cope and hopefully to come back? So have a think about that. Write down your answers. Stop the video, write down what you think, and in a little while, come back to the video and see what we can do with your answers. So on this slide, I'm showing some of the ideas that people came up with at the conference. So adaptability, innovation, optimism, creativity, resilience, flexibility, collaboration, and understanding. And there were others, and some of them were repeated also. And I would say that I wouldn't have too much difficulty in placing those into my umbrella attributes. Yeah? You know, you might do. Maybe that's a good exercise for you to do. See if you can do that. Yeah. I struggled with optimism, actually, and I thought it was a really good one. And so I might stick that as the last box, the one that got away. Yeah. I thought, what do you think? So those attributes, really good, wonderful answers. Where do they fit with the attributes I have? Or should we create different attributes or adapt the ones that I've shown you? And of course, we can do this the other way around. We can look at the attributes that I had come up with. It wasn't me coming up with them. It was all these people coming up with them. Yeah, and we can say, well, are these attributes needed to cope with the pandemic? Are they useful to have? So, is being heart-minded a useful attribute to have? You know, is it useful to care about others? Is it useful to have empathy for others? Is it useful to be determined enough to get to the heart of an issue in a pandemic? I think so. Being proactive. Well, you know, those countries that had leaders who were able to be proactive and take action quickly, you know, they were proactive, weren't they? And so very often they were quite successful. You know, being able to be independent. Yeah, if you're stuck on your own, you have to do a lot of things independently. Or if you're looking after sick relatives, you have to be independent, collaborative, us working together, countries working together. We could have seen perhaps a bit more of that. Being open-minded, being part of a community together, the way you're all together. So being open-minded, looking for new solutions, being principled in thinking about other people. So when you're taking precautions, you're not just thinking about yourself, you're actually doing things for other people too, so that you're all safe. And so on. We could go through all of these. I leave it to you to go through if you would like to do that. Are these attributes useful in a pandemic? I think they are. And so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't help young people to develop these attributes at school. But how? So I was very topical in a way, and you can see in that situation of the pandemic that I chose, right, you can determine the attributes needed to cope, to thrive, to maximize your chances of being happy and successful. And you'll probably find in any situation there's probably not much difference to the attributes of a holistic learner, the attributes that I started with. And there's a good reason for that. And it's because these are the attributes we're born with. They are the attributes of being a human, the attributes of the human spirit. And these are our superpowers. We don't need to wait for some superhero to come and save us if we develop these attributes. And we don't need to wait for strong leaders to come and tell us what to do if we choose wise people to lead us and if we, in turn, are wise. So these are the attributes of the human who learns in life. They're the attributes that we need to help young people recognize and identify in themselves and in their culture, and then develop, manage, and become literate with them so that they can become the sort of people we've been dreaming of having in our society or building societies with. So these questions I've asked today, these exercises we've been through today, you can do this with your young people, whether you're a teacher with your class, or perhaps a parent with your children, or perhaps even as a school leader with your teachers. You can go through this process and identify for yourselves the attributes that you need. But what do you do with the answers that you receive? When you have your list of attributes, what do you do with them? And that's the problem, I think, that a lot of these new programs have been finding difficult. What do you actually do with them? How do you get people to develop them? Interesting. So many people who sell the idea of holistic education, they forget that we have, as practical teachers and practical educators, we have education systems to contend with. We have school subjects, curriculum, syllabi, exams, university entrance to aim for. And of course, there are schools out there that have done away with all that and they do their own thing. But we can't all be like them, can we? We have to follow our program. We have to follow our curriculum, our syllabus. So, in a way, we're bound to teach what's in those, the content, the skills. And sometimes it's quite heavy and it's quite a lot to get through. So where's the time to develop attributes? And apart from perhaps using some homeroom time or some pastoral program time or assemblies or things like that, apart from that, and a little corner of your lesson, to be explicit about attributes, most of the attribute development actually happens through the way you teach. Is thinking, all right, I'm going to teach my physics, or I'm going to teach my Punjabi. I'm going to teach that subject, but how am I going to develop the kids' curiosity? How am I going to develop their balance, their understanding of balance? How am I going to, etc.? Okay, so it's in your approach to your teaching, and that doesn't take too much to change. Honestly, it doesn't. Why doesn't it? Because you're human and you understand these things also. You know and experience the development of learner attributes. So you can build this into your teaching. And it's not taking extra time, it's saving you time. So I think the way forward for us is to develop learners in the context of our subjects. And you probably know the old joke about the two teachers who ended up at a dinner party, and the host said, "Oh, what do you do?" And one said, "Oh, we're teachers." And the host said, "Oh, what do you teach?" And the teacher said, "Well, I teach mathematics." "Oh, it's very interesting." And asked the other teacher, "What do you teach?" And the teacher said, "Well, I teach children." So the difference between teaching a subject to students and helping learners develop in the context of a subject is the key to the paradigm shift that we have all been talking about for decades. If you ever saw Sir Ken Robinson's talk, TED Talk, the original one back in 2006, was it? Or 2004? I can't remember. Have a look at that, see what he says, and then see the next one that he did some 8 years later. Okay? See what you think about that. That's the paradigm shift he challenged us to make, and we're not being able to do it. It's not really difficult. For me, it's a little bit like the difference between if you took a group of young people on a nature walk, and you went and you told them, oh, this is a rock, and this is a plant, and this is a something, and you named all the things, and you told them to write that down and to learn those things. All right, so that's one way. What I'm asking you to do is to take those children on a nature walk and say, our job is to identify interesting and unusual and maybe overlooked living things. See what you can find. Right? And the children run away and they find something and they take a photograph of it, or they draw it, and they say, teacher, what is this? Oh, and the teacher said, well, that's a daisy. Oh, okay. Teacher, what's this? And the teacher says, look, isn't there some way that you can find out without me? What if I don't know something? What would you do if I don't know the name of something? And they have to figure it out. Well, we could ask our grandfather or our grandmother. Or we could, what if there was an app where you could take the photograph of it, put it in the internet, and find it? Or an app that actually shows, and these things exist, of course, and so they're thinking. And so you're getting, basically what I'm saying is you're getting them to think in a different way. It's a much more holistic experience in getting them to be responsible for their learning. And that sort of is the difference in shift that I'm talking about. So walking through nature can be a stifling, limited experience, or it can be an engaging experience full of opportunities to develop attributes. And your classroom is just like that. No matter what you teach, there's no excuse. Okay? You need to identify those opportunities for attribute development for yourself. And who can help you with that? Your learners. By making the act of identifying opportunities for development of attributes explicit, we're giving young people the chance to join in, to make suggestions and to begin to gain a literacy of learner development, to be able to notice where curiosity is in their lives and in their cultures and what level it's operating at. Where could it be useful? Where could it be developed? And so on. By making the development of attributes explicit, we give learners the language of being a learner, and with language comes the ability to have some sort of control on one's development as a learner for life. So, of course, life is at school, and a lot of life for young people and for teachers is school. And it's important for all of us, actually. The consequences of school is important for society. So am I asking you to do more? No, I'm not. I'm suggesting that you take this different approach. So let's say you've asked these questions of your community, and there's a feeling that, yes, these are important attributes for our young people to learn, and wouldn't it be a good thing if they learnt it through their education, through the way they approached their education, through the way they approached learning, and for you, from the way you supported them by your approach to your teaching. Okay, so you've got a clear idea of a vision of where you want to go. Now, the first thing I do with my teachers is to try and help them to find out what they're doing already that supports this. And at first, it's like some teachers. There was a group of Japanese teachers, for example, who said, "Oh, we don't do anything." We found out that they did, because they were good, warm-hearted teachers with good intentions for their children. So what happened was we actually uncovered what they did in their day, and we found that implicitly they did help the children to develop these attributes. And they did do activities and create opportunities for them to develop those attributes, but it was on a very implicit level. So the children perhaps didn't even notice. The teachers perhaps didn't even notice either. So the first thing was, well, what if you made that more explicit and explained and explored with the children why that thing happens, why that strategy you use works? And so in doing that, suddenly people become aware that, number one, there is an attribute. Number two, this is an opportunity for developing it. Number three, we could do it more, or we could do it better, or we could put a language to it so that we can start to manage it. Wouldn't that be great? So a lot of your teachers are doing this already, I'm sure. They identify it. That brings about a certain amount of confidence for them. Wow, I'm actually doing some of this stuff that this person's telling me about, that we've agreed to do. I'm actually doing it. It's great. What's the next question? The next question is, what could I change? What easy, simple changes could I make to what I do, or what we do? What could we make to increase the number of opportunities for young people to learn, develop the learner attributes? Yeah. So what simple things could we take? What first baby steps could we make in increasing the number? Could we arrange the things differently? Could we speak in a different way? Could we introduce lots of different ways? Okay, and then in doing that and seeing the results coming back, the positive engagement of young people in developing themselves coming back encourages the teacher and encourages the learners and encourages the parents to get involved more and to take bigger steps, more steps towards that. But of course, there's also those attributes that perhaps are really difficult to get your head around. How can we actually develop curiosity? Yeah? It may be a thing that people believe in your community. Maybe people believe that you're just born with it or you're not. So for those things, maybe you form a committee and you say, right, you guys go and investigate in the next few months, investigate and see if there are ways that we can come up with that will help us to develop curiosity. Or you could just Google, how do I develop my curiosity? And you'll get millions of answers and replies and some very good strategies that you can use. So there are no real difficulties except in our getting used to it. And it's very important to take sort of these baby steps towards this. So, and perhaps also I'd like to say that there are, I've been working in a country where many of the young teachers coming in don't really want to do teaching. They're just taking it as a job. They want to get married and start a family, and they're just doing a job until that happens. Okay, that's fine. I have, however, in the same region, met many really good educators who started like that, but caught the education bug and were so immersed, strangely, not in their subject, but in helping other young people to develop into successful and happy people. So we want to help those young teachers that are coming up. We want to get them inspired more and more and more. Okay, so what better inspiration than seeing young people becoming more responsible for their own learning, developing and growing themselves. And as young teachers, maybe they will also grow and develop these attributes for themselves. And of course, then there are lots of older, more experienced teachers who are perhaps have been teaching the same way in a very traditional way for most of their lives, and they're coming up towards the end of their career, and they think, oh no, there's a big change coming in, and what about me? They're not going to want me. And of course we're going to want you, because you have the experience of working under those traditional conditions. And if you care about your young people, you have found ways to care about them, probably implicitly, but we want to know what those are. And we want you to be involved and included in that transformation that we're going to make for education. So this is a very inclusive process. We need to make it happen now. So finally, on a cultural note, does it really matter, since we're talking about inclusion, does it really matter that those of you in Indonesia, perhaps, maybe see collaboration differently than your colleagues in China? Does it really matter that colleagues in Brazil have different role models in their society that show us how people can be successful through anti-fragility? We have different examples in Brazil than in Norway. No, it doesn't. What really matters is that we start to see these attributes as important to us as they are. We need to see that they're important for our well-being, and indeed, I would argue for our survival. And we need to start adding them to the top of our to-do list and our priorities, so that our young people and our teachers and parents and communities become better learners and become more learner literate, so that they will really do well in the silly things in life, like driving tests and school exams, but also in the important things like relationships and professions and challenges that the world that they've inherited from us throws at them. Let's do it. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the people at NAPS for allowing me to have this talk with you. We had some technical difficulties from both ends, and so there wasn't a recording of this presentation. So I've made this specially to fit in to the NAPS folder for those of you who wanted to look through it again, or those of you who missed the session and wanted to see what we were doing in our session. So, very soon, I hope, through developing real learners and through the creation of the Academy of Learner Development, which isn't out yet, but it will be soon, we will be offering some professional development along these lines. Like, how do you really do this? The other thing is to create the environment and the community, the learning community and the learning culture as well. If you are interested in any of this for your school, whether you are a rich school or a poor school, it doesn't matter, please contact us and we'll be very happy to help you out. Have a good day and be safe.